Right now, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. We have a few days of practice. I am with Team Cuba with the World Baseball Classic. We have a few days of practice here, and then we're gonna fly to Puerto Rico for our first round of the tournament.
Very cool. So, what are we talking about today since we have you for a little while?
All right, so let's talk hamstrings. Um, last week we talked about growth plates and growth spurts and how they relate to shoulder pain and throwing injuries, and hamstrings are no different. My goal for Baseball Strong is to educate young athletes, especially middle school and high school, but also the parents. This is something that every parent should know because when it comes to middle school and high school athletes, it's usually the parents that are managing the healthcare, where to go to the doctor, who to go see, what to do. And a lot of times it's the parents find that they have no one to turn to. So today I want to give you a little snippet of how to prevent hamstring injuries. And if you do have a hamstring injury, perhaps some tips on what to do, what to look for, and who to go see. So so, like I said last week, growth spurts. So, when kids are going through a growth spurt, one of the things they complain about is tight hamstrings. The femur, the long bone of the leg, is getting longer. All the bones are getting longer faster than the muscles, and so you don't necessarily get a tight hamstring. You just get a longer bone on a muscle that is the appropriate length for that age. And so sometimes parents can get a little confused about what a real hamstring problem is. Between the ages of, let's say, 11, 12 through, high school age, some of these things could be happening. And so your kid may complain about hamstring tightness, hamstring pulls, hamstring soreness, and before you start thinking that they have strained the hamstrings muscles, first let's think about the stage of development that your kid is in. You know, what I want to put in your head is like the first thing to think about is, okay, has my kid been growing at a rapid rate the last, year or so? So always keep that in mind because when it comes to healthcare and managing injuries, perspective is very, very important. Understanding the age, the situation, what kind of sport, what kind of activity. It's important to keep in mind that perspective is important because when something hurts, you want to get all the information. You want to get all the medical history. You want to think about all the things that have been happening to your child, the growth rate, uh, the sport they play. Are they eating right? Are they sleeping right? So before we go to, oh, he pulled his hamstring, let's think about some of those things. Like last week we talked about growth plates. First thing I want you guys to think about when it comes to any kind of hamstring soreness is, okay, could this be a growth plate issue? Obviously, if it is, growth plates are going to close on their own, and there's no speeding them up. You can't speed that up. So sometimes you may have to wait that out. But there are things that you can do to strengthen the hamstrings and make sure that the hamstrings are ready for the sport. Um, you know, One of the things that parents all need to know is, when your child complains about uh, hamstring soreness, hamstring tightness, before you go crazy thinking going to the doctor and stuff like that, I want to share with you some things that you can start doing on a regular basis with your kids so that perhaps you can take care of this yourself and not have to go through all the hassle of going to an orthopedic doctor for him to tell you that your child's growth plates are open and he's just tight because of the bones are a little longer. So, after you've thought about that a little bit, it's important that we understand a few things. When a hamstring is sore and painful, first thing that people always think about is, oh, they're tight, let's stretch them. In my experience, most times stretching is not the solution for hamstrings. Usually, hamstrings are tight not because of length, but because of weakness. So before we go to start stretching and tell your kid, oh, your hamstrings are tight because you just never stretch. I've told you to stretch 20 million times and now you're tight. Perhaps the majority of the time is that the hamstrings are weak. One of the things that we need to understand about the function of the hamstrings are a decelerator group of muscles. There's three hamstrings. And the function of the hamstring is when we're running and the leg swings forward and is about to hit the ground, the hamstrings put on their brakes so that you can put the foot on the ground, grip the ground, and then propel to take the next step. Most hamstring injuries happen when they're running, and a lot of times in baseball, it happens when they're running to first base and they're trying to stretch a ground ball into a single, and they lunge for the bag and they put the hamstring at such a great length that the hamstring is not able to create enough force to decelerate the leg right before it hits the bag. And in baseball, you'll see oftentimes a guy running to first, he lunges for the bag, he hits the bag, and then you see him hobbling past first base, grabbing their leg. So that's usually how it happens. A lot of times it's not because the hamstrings are tight. It's because the hamstrings weren't strong enough to slow down the leg swing. Also, one of the things that we need to understand is your glutes and your hamstrings and the opposite side of your low back, they work together to slow down the leg swing. So as the leg swings, one side of the body, as the right leg is swinging, the left side of the body is rotating to the right. And so the left low back, the right glute, and the right hamstring, they function together. Oftentimes, because of poor running mechanics, the the muscle that is actually taking over the whole action is the hamstring, when in fact they all have to work together. And the right sequence is for the glute to fire first, then the hamstring, then the other side of the low back. Because a lot of our kids have poor running form, and because they're young and they're not strong enough yet, a lot of times the action of the leg, the action of the leg is being decelerated by the hamstrings taking all the force. So think about the action of the hamstrings. So before we start thinking about stretching, let's focus first on the glutes. One of the things that we ignore when it comes to hamstrings is the glute. And we need to understand that our kids need to be doing exercises so that they're working on the glutes as well as the hamstrings. So first, like last week we talked about efficiency before velocity. Well, same thing applies for the hamstrings. Efficient running mechanics before running speed. A lot of times, kids will join a training program. Let's just say, even if you're doing a training program, you can still go wrong if you're doing the wrong things or looking at it the wrong way. For young kids, the most important thing, in my opinion, is efficient running mechanics. I've treated many hamstrings, and the majority of the time, one of the reasons it happens is because of poor running mechanics. Even at the big league level, a lot of those guys don't really work on their running mechanics because sometimes running mechanics is not very important to them until they pull a hamstring. Uh, because baseball takes up so much time, practicing your fielding, practicing your hitting, practicing everything else. Running mechanics is usually not a very important part of the game. But if you are, first thing you should look at with your kid, how are his running mechanics? Are his arms flailing all over the place? When he runs, he looks like he's digging into the ground and he looks like a chicken. Something you need to consider is trying to find a reputable trainer to work on running mechanics. Another part of this too is talking to your kids about base running the right way. When we run the bases, sometimes there's so much action and they're going crazy and they hit the ball and the guy drops the ball and they were slowing down that they kind of caught in between and then all of a sudden they were going fast and then they slow down and they accelerate again. That start stop action is also one of the reasons why we pull hamstrings and why we hurt ourselves is because when we run the bases, instead of maintaining the same tempo, the good running mechanics and the same speed, we go fast, then all of a sudden slow down, and all of a sudden start again. So if you're going multiple bases, if they're running for a long, like a double or a triple, one of the things we need to train our kids is to be able to run multiple bases with the right tempo and not slow down at first base and then accelerate again and then slow down at second base and accelerate again. That is the number one cause of hamstring problems is that starting and stopping because they don't have the right strength, the decelerating strength, the braking strength that is required for that kind of action. Same thing with the throwing shoulder. A lot of the injuries happen because our kids don't have the decelerating strength, the braking strength to slow down the arm after you throw the baseball. Well, same thing with running. Our kids don't have the decelerating strength to slow down the leg and properly push off the ground and take the next step. So the first thing, as far as the methodology about working hamstrings, you want to work on exercises that decelerate the leg, uh, such as Nordic curls. For those of you that don't know what that is, if you can look it up on YouTube, Nordic curls is a very common exercise, very simple exercise. Anyone can do it. It is very difficult sometimes, so but it's a very easy exercise to do anywhere, anytime. Um, so first, running mechanics. Second, decelerating strength. Third, exercises that develop the glutes, that work the glutes, such as squats, deadlifts, uh, glute bridges, hip thrusts. All those exercises develop the glute. The other thing is the side glutes. It's called the gluteus medius. So we have glute max, which is the bigger muscles, and then the glute medius, which is the side glute muscles, and they help to stabilize the leg when you're in a single leg stance. An exercise that I recommend every baseball player do is mini band exercises. Again, you can look this up on YouTube, mini band exercises that work the gluteus medius. Very, very good exercise, very important exercise because it supports the leg when we're in a single leg stance. One of the things I want to do also in this video, I want to include a sample workout. There are many, many variations of exercises for hamstring, deceleration, glutes, all that stuff. But for parents out there, I just want to always keep it simple, stuff you could do at home and things that are not going to require too much equipment because I always want to recommend things that are cheap and simple to do at home, not requiring to go to gym or requiring to buy expensive equipment. And the last area that I recommend is core, core control. You need to our midsection, like I said, when we're running, the opposite side of the low back is also involved in that decelerating movement. You need to be able to control your midsection. When we talk about core, it's not doing sit-ups, it's not just doing med ball drills and stuff like that. You need to do exercises that stabilize the spine, that stabilize the pelvis, all that area in the low back and the hip bones. You want to do exercises that promote muscle endurance, muscle stability around that midsection. Exercises such as planks, Pallof presses, dead bugs, bird dogs, simple things that you can do that are very boring, but that teach our kids how to control their trunk, control their core. So again, running mechanics, running with good tempo, decelerating strength for the hamstrings, glute training, glute medius training, and core control. Those are the areas that you need to be looking at anytime you suspect that your kid is having a hamstring problem. After you've done all that, yeah, then perhaps you introduce some stretching. Stretching for the hamstrings is always a very sensitive subject. A lot of people believe that you got to stretch them all the time. Some people don't. Some people just believe in warm up. Some people believe in both. For me, my opinion about exercise is that everything works at the right time, at the right place, and the right person, but you need to have an educated idea of how to approach it. And before I do any kind of stretching or do any kind of yoga type stuff that people always go to, oh, he's got tight hamstrings. Yeah, maybe he needs to do yoga. That's not the answer. You got to look at all the other things first. In my opinion, number one thing, if I had nothing else to do, I would just work on running mechanics and do sprints throughout the week. One of the things that we always recommended our players is at least twice a week to do 40 to 60-yard sprints at an intensity of 85% or more. Maybe 3 to 5 repetitions. It's not a conditioning session. It's just an exercise exposure to make sure that your kids are exposed to high speed sprinting. Because in baseball, if you're a high school player and you play twice a week and you don't get a hit in those 2 days, you may not sprint all week. Also, I've seen a lot of coaches, instead of conditioning with sprints, they'll do conditioning where the exercise or where the running is sub-maximal. The kids are not running at 85% or more because they're doing a lot of repetitions and they're trying to pace themselves. So you gotta take some time each week, twice a week, to do at least 3 to 5 high velocity, high intensity sprints. Because if your hamstrings are not exposed to high intensity sprinting, you're exposing yourself. So to kind of wrap this up, this is a quick one. Hamstrings are something that is, in my opinion, next to shoulders and elbows, a big issue in baseball. But parents, when your kid has a sore hamstring, complaining of tightness, first let's think growth plates, let's think strength, let's think running mechanics, decelerating exercises, core control, glute training, and those kinds of things. So I'm going to include some exercises on the link. I'm also going to include some pictures of some of these exercises to kind of give you guys ideas of what these things look like. Uh, but if I can give you one takeaway when it comes to hamstrings, stretching is not the answer. Stretching for me is the last thing I do with hamstrings because most hamstrings are a matter of weakness, not a matter of tightness. Even though the complaint that we always get is, oh, my hamstrings are tight. Could you stretch me? Yeah, sure, I can stretch you, but your hamstring is still weak. And when you go run, the hamstring is is going to tighten up because it's weak. Muscles get strained because they're weak and because they are exposed to a force that they're not used to. And so the body's very smart. And the first thing that it's going to do is try to protect itself. And when it comes to running, when the leg feels like it's exposed and the hamstrings feel like, wait a minute, we haven't done this before. We better tighten up because we got to protect the knees. We got to protect the hips. That's when things happen. So it's not a tightness issue. It's a weakness issue. One last thing I just thought about, hydration. One of the things that lead to this type of issue is a lot of kids, in baseball, where you sit around, maybe it's an early day and you don't eat breakfast, you don't drink enough water. When muscles are dehydrated, they're also more prone to be strained and to have these kind of situations. So make sure that your kids are always hydrated. That's not just for hamstrings, that's for everything. When you're playing a sport, you need to be drinking water throughout the game. If anything, one of the things that for people that don't like to drink water, just a little swig every inning, just a little swig. It doesn't have to be a whole bottle or a whole hydration drink. If you could just one little swig, one mouthful of liquid per inning, that should get you through. And of course, after the game, make sure you drink plenty of water. But again, parents, hopefully this helps you, gives you an idea of what to look for, what to do. And of course, you can always reach me. I'm doing this for the parents. For you parents. I'm doing this for you, for the kids. My message is always to educate, to give you ideas about how to handle some of these situations as a family, because many of the cases that I get now are a parent that calls me that their kid is experiencing this or the other. And so giving you guys a little bit of ammunition so that you can make some decisions when you run into these kind of problems. So, Kevin, you got anything else for me?
I'm telling you, we're in the chat just jealous. I mean, look, we're talking about how the access that people have today to professionals like yourself and at such a young age